And right now, Ignas, about the amazing game of crowns and pawns and characters. So please welcome.
Thank you. Okay, so I will probably touch more than just about the characters, as I was asked to tell a little bit about the story development and additional details, but the focus will be, in a broader sense, about making the player's character, the one that player control. So who am I for this presentation? Well, I work with Tag of Joy. My name is Ignas, and in the game Crowns and Pawns, I am the writer, voiceover director, puzzle designer, and many other small roles inside. My background comes from filmmaking mostly, but now I guess it's more of game development for the past, 10 years almost. And I used to have a band. I used to dabble in photography and filmmaking, as I mentioned. So I'm the classical dude of jack of all trades, master of none. So I ponder in one place or another and always have an opinion, but never a technical one. So let's talk about personalizing the player character. What I mean with that is how to make a character, doesn't matter whether it's a fox or it's a Doom guy slashing the monsters, or it's a 16-year-old girl in a university in Life is Strange. How to make it personal, for the player. Well, we always try and strive as creators to kind of make the story personal for the player, to make it their story, not our story, even though we wrote it all, but we try to make sure that the experience that the player gets makes him or her feel like they lived that, not someone written them for it. So what can we do with it, and what can we, what kind of tools can we use to enhance that experience and make it more immersive for the player? First of satisfying the expectations. It's something that already was spoken about by the first speaker, and I think it's a very important point, because we don't really need the player to have a character that represents exactly them. We need the character that kind of represents their expectations and their preferences, desires, things like that. Because, as I mentioned, we have no problem getting into the shoes of someone else as long as it works as we want it to work. If something doesn't work in the way that we want it to work, then we usually struggle. We don't believe in it, and we get thrown out of the story without getting the real satisfaction from it. Not every player expects the same thing. So, again, mentioned the first presentation beautifully, that some want a shooter-looter for fun, some want a horror shooter to get all scared and shivery. Both are viable, and whatever game you enter as a player, even though you might have expected something slightly different, as a creator, we always try to cater and surprise the player in a positive way, positive light, that would make their experience slightly tailored towards their preferences, even if, though, the game itself is not necessarily what they expected or what was their initial idea or wish. So a little bit about a player character in Crowns and Pawns. You can see her on the left. It's Milda. She is an American Lithuanian girl who, in the game, lives in Chicago and inherits a house back in Lithuania. Everything in the games begin with nothing, basically. Whenever you load a game and press the play button, that is the first thing that the game has to begin. Oftentimes I see it forgotten, even in bigger titles. Let me just check here. All right, let's mention Witcher at first. All right, amazing, fantastic game, one of the best of them all. And yet, if you come into Witcher 3 without any particular knowledge of the background, the lore, the possibilities, the characters, you're kind of confused of what's happening. You have to spend a lot of time trying to get all the strains from the sides. Seeing the first video makes no sense to you. Kind of they're searching for something. Who are they? What is happening? What is this magic? But eventually, perhaps after an hour or two, you get used to it and you kind of get rolling it. So it is important to mention that when you start from zero. So when the player presses play button, that's when they start. That's when the beginning of your story begins. You cannot rely on them watching a trailer. You cannot rely on them knowing anything about your game. So you should be aware that you should be always easing them in from the very start and introducing the character, the story, the little mentions of what makes the game what it is, without hoping that someone will know something about it. So in our case, we started with, because our game is based on Lithuanian historic lore, we did not expect many players to know it at all. And we wanted to have a connection with whoever is playing, without pretending that they are either interested or knowledgeable about things. So we started from a character that is separated from that lore, but is also in partially connected. So she's a Lithuanian American girl, living in Chicago now, and she has to go to Lithuania. That's where the whole bigger story will begin. But her disconnection from Lithuania allows us to play with the knowledge of the character and the player as well. So whenever she goes to Lithuania, we allow the player to kind of play out her through the choices of dialogues and details in conversations, how much lore she can actually know. So someone mentions a name, you can choose, oh yeah, that name, I know about it, I've heard about it. Or you can choose, I have never heard about it, why is it so important that you're talking about that? And that way we kind of have the same character who can act both knowledgeable and absolutely clueless. But now back a little bit to the character creator, how we introduced the character itself. So character creators, depending on whether it's a sandboxy game or more closed game, usually have either clean slate characters or predefined characters. As mentioned, Witcher is a very predefined character. It has a huge lore behind it. He has, even the looks, how he looks is kind of predefined. Although the beard in the third Witcher, that was non-canon, I think, until they decided to do so. But yeah, even in Witcher, the ability to modify the character through different means, for example, introduction of haircuts, or the fact that Geralt's beard actually grows through time. I think that's an amazing detail that kind of immerses us with the character. Even though if it's a small one, you can feel the progress of time. You can rely on many such small details to kind of keep the player within the reality of the game. Sims, probably one of the most remarkable character creators over there. Slightly confusing with all the options available, but remarkably unique in its way that you can create everything from their thoughts to their voice pitches to their looks and so on with hundreds of DLC for a good price. Yeah, but the issue with let's say Sims versus Witcher part is that Sims don't, as I said, is a sandboxy game, and it allows, well, it does not really require dialogue, and everything is sul sul and so on, and everyone can say that and mean anything, whatever the player imagines, which is great for Sims, not great for Geralt. I think one of the best predefined character games that have used a predefined character with the most, I guess, adjustability and different creation for the individualism of the character is probably Mass Effect series. You can tailor your character from whichever color you want to scars and gender, whichever you prefer, and also by the choices you make. Being Paragon or being Renegade defines your not just the outside look, but the inside mentality throughout the story, and of course branching of the story. It's also a very unique game in a sense that it is kind of it is actually a linear game, very well disguised as an open world. But that's for another story. For our character creator, we didn't want to start. Well, we wanted the player to have a kind of a voice of how the character would look like. Of course, we had a predefined character, so we had to have some sort of a ethnical background, some sort of characteristics that would fit throughout all of our story. But also we wanted the player to be able to start not from the standard character creator, hey, pick anything, but kind of involve everything inside the game. So we started from the screen that you see on the top left. It's actually a computer screen that you start with, and you are creating a random character for an online video game inside of a game. After you do those simple tasks like picking your hair, main color, and a symbol, you then go through a dialogue with your friend who calls over Skype. Skype. And with that dialogue, you also define whether you have tattoos, what kind of tattoos, what is your class or profession, as it may so. And then once you're done with the conversation, you're interrupted with a ring on the door. And finally, you get to see the character. The character gets to look the way you kind of chose. So you can see Milda with, let's say if you choose that, you would see her in spiky hair with pink pajamas with hearts on them. And that gives a very kind of a good emotion, I think, from the players. They get to see that the game reacts to them, as well as they were already in the game, and the game did not distract them separately from creating their own character. So you already kind of did everything while just existing inside of the game world, kind of real time, instead of taking a separate time for creating characters, backgrounds, and everything else. Afterwards, you can, of course, go to the wardrobe and change your outfit to whichever you desire, because she cannot go outside in her pajamas. We were slightly debating whether to allow to change the hair, but we thought it would be too mean to lock in the hair at the beginning. So you can change the hair and the outfit in the wardrobe, as we usually do. Right, so one thing I think we not used enough was the color scheme. The color scheme, for example, for the tiny player character over there, the pink, it only affects the pajamas, but I think if I be doing something more with it, it would probably affect the UI elements and let's say the phone that she uses and stuff like that. But hindsight. That's a great thing. Symbols that allow us to also kind of tell the story. For example, the tattoo, right? We had 4 tattoo variations, and 2 of them were kind of recalling the background of the character, or introducing to the background of the character. We had a Baltic cross design and Baltic traditional tattoos, just something like that. Yeah, and then clothes, right? The clothes, a little bit more details about them. I don't think we should think about clothes just as a simple look. We should think about what kind of statement do they have, right? So one would be more perhaps adventurous, the other one would be more goth, or the third one would be more lesbian, kind of traditional looks, right? And the classics on the poster one that I don't know if anybody uses that shirt. Yeah, so at the beginning we actually tried to make all the clothes kind of fit in the color scheme, that you could mix them and they would all sort of would look like from the same wardrobe, but then we understood, nah, that just makes everything very bland, boring. So I think, you know, go crazy if you ever designing clothes. People like meme characters or you know, let people choose. Right, the gameplay elements, right? Tools and mechanics. There are many things that you can use in a game that would make you more involved in the surroundings. Both for the player character and in general, you know, you have to keep players always involved. For example, we had a phone, right? That's something very personal that everyone has and everyone uses every day. So we thought, you know, what would you expect if you click a phone? You hope you get some messages, you hope you can call someone, or you can receive phone calls and get messages and perhaps do something more. We wanted to do something more, but there were limitations to what we could, and eventually decided to, you know, added some note usage and so on. But it is also kind of a personal thing for a player, and especially it's a fun thing that you're walking around and doing seemingly your random puzzle that you want to complete, and you're stuck, and suddenly someone sends you a message. You're like, oh, I'm excited, show me, all right, nice, good, now I have a conversation with my bestie that is back home in Chicago, and I'm here and have a connection with the other characters. Kind of expands your horizons over there, and makes the world itself much more open feeling, even though, you know, you have like 3 screens that you can wander around. That fact that someone texts you or you can call someone gives you a feel that something is outside of those 3 screens over there. Branching paths, oh my goodness. Again, one of the best branching paths, I think, except for maybe the last part, is from Mass Effect. They did it brilliantly. They put everything kind of in small hubs and pretended that they matter on the grander scale, but actually, you know, wherever you go, you have that small story that happens, and you know, you take either one or the other, and eventually it collapses on itself into a standard same story. In Crowns and Pawns, we mostly did the same, except for much smaller scale, and probably in dialogues it's mostly seen because most of the dialogues kind of are, I wouldn't call it fake, because they aren't fake. They have different reasons for being such. But whenever a dialogue choice comes out, you know, you have 3 choices, you press any choice, and you eventually end up still in the same place whatever you choose. But for that, I will have more in the next slide. So controls. Controls, one of the things that is important for the player character. I mean, that's the unit you are in control of, and that is the thing that you have to connect. And if controls are horrible, if they're confusing or somehow otherwise not pleasant to use, it instantly pulls you out of the story. You're just struggling to be able to play the game. One of the things I remember is NBA. I tried to play the game. Well, not that recently, but anyway, I tried to play the game, and I felt like that player that I'm controlling feels like I'm controlling a submarine, not a player that is, you know, fast-paced, attacking, shooting forward, whatever. It was heavy, it was uncomfortable, it felt bad. Good example of good controls are, I'd say, you know, whenever it is natural, when you don't have to think too much about what to do, and whenever you click that button, the things are done. I wouldn't say that we ideally made the controls in Crowns and Pawns. We had plenty of things that we can improve upon, especially probably the speed of things that happen and so on. Although I think much besides a few tricky places, most of them are kind of intuitive and simple. All right, dialogue. Well, this is what I spent a lot of time on. Why dialogue and choices are, I think, extremely important, and one of the very easy to place a connection between the player and the character in area is that every choice you get is a responsibility for the player. Especially whenever it's something big, you know, to save this one or to save this one, or do you agree to do that or not agree to do that? The player is involved. He feels responsible, and it also coincides with rhythm and attention. Whenever player gets to choose a dialogue line, he is paying attention. So that's why the rhythm that we had in Crowns and Pawns, let's say, every 6 lines, about every 6 lines, it doesn't matter whether the choice is important or not, whether it has a bigger branch or you know, collapses instantly. Every 6 lines, we had a choice because people get bored. And what I used to do whenever writing, I used to read it out loud, and if I fall asleep at the end of the sentence, I'm okay. We need to rewrite that. Memory and recall. I think that's one of the most kind of satisfying, gratifying thing that makes. I'm not even sure if it's necessarily a main character thing, but is the recall of the choice. Let's say you made a choice in the beginning of the game, and suddenly 5 scenes over, someone says, "Hey, remember? You made a choice." And then you're like, "Oh, nice. I remember. Thank you very much." So the memory recall is just simply an answer to a choice that is heavily delayed. It's something that always I try to remember that, okay, if I wrote this one, maybe someone will remember at the end. Great. So there is, let's say, a scene where there is a if you use the same T-shirt for a couple of scenes, a character will actually recognize the T-shirt and tell you about that. So, you know, small details like that are pleasant. And if you drop enough of them, it feels like the world is alive and reacting to you very much. All right. Audio. Right. Last part. Now, whenever creating audio for a game, for the main character, oftentimes you can choose, you know, ignore it at all and have a silent protagonist. Many games do, although I think that is a terrible, terrible loss to all humanity who plays the games with silent protagonists. And silent protagonist is not necessarily the one who, you know, who cannot speak, because if you have some sort of a blob that rolls around in a platformer, he doesn't have to speak. He cannot speak, but he can make sounds. And if the sound is pleasant, if the sound is kind of what you expect, when someone jumps and drops and squishes and beeps, that is already a great thing to have. So it's not necessarily that if a character does not speak in general, that it cannot make sounds that are pleasant for your ears and something that connects you to it. Every time you hear a character interact with something, it will make a sound, and you make a connection. You have the expectation next time you drop into the puddle, it'll make a sound. So there are examples of as Sims, for example, the one that allows you to have adjustable pitches for the voices, which is great. Again, not great if you need to actually voice the dialogues, because multiple actors, of course, cost way more and takes way more time to complete, and is just complicated issue in general, right? And for voiceovers, it's important to have good actors, especially for your main character. It's gonna be the character that's gonna be there for every single scene of the game. It's probably gonna be there. So. And a good actor's performance, I think it makes a huge difference from what people will like or not. All right, and of course, music themes, music bits. In general, if you imagine a character, for example, Darth Vader entering, you know what's playing. You have no doubt what's playing. So if you have that connection with the player and the character, it's a win-win. All right, so as I mentioned, characters don't have to mimic the players themselves. That's not a necessity, but they should fit the player's expectations and preferences. If they want to be, play more of a thuggish, roguish character, let them have a little bit of that. If they want to be heroic and truthful, let them have a little bit of that. Even in the simple conversations, you can implement a hint of that in one or the other. And then if you don't have a choice, then make in the middle, put a glare silently, and that's amazing. Nobody knows what that means. All the team is required to create a personal character. Yeah, as I mentioned, throughout the whole, the artists, the writers, the musicians, the animators, and all the technical team is required to make it personal, because every single one adds an amazing part that makes the character what it is. And yeah, big things are made from small ones. It's, as I mentioned, put enough of those small details in the game and everybody will feel like they are listened to. So thank you very much. If you have questions, let me know.
I'm sorry. Thanks a lot. Do we have some questions? Okay, I see.
Thank you for amazing speech. And I have one comment about silent protagonist is Half-Life. It's, I don't know, it looks pretty good. And
it can totally work. Nothing is a rule really here. It's just, go with whatever feels nice. And also, it kind of becomes a meme when you use a silent protagonist, like entirely.
Oh yeah, like the voice actor died.
Exactly.
And another question about crowns and pawns. I don't know who played here the game, but probably most of the developers. And I'm just curious, who are responsible for that infamous library scene?
What exactly do you mean? Like it's a little bit slow or what?
Well, I'm not saying anything, but yeah, it's pretty stucky.
Yeah, I think the library scene, why it had kind of multiple, I guess, issues was, again, everyone's responsible for it. Some people wrote it too complicated, some people animated it too slow, some, changes were made during the production and kind of nearing the end of it. To fix one thing, then you break another. I think it definitely should and could and perhaps someday will be, in a better pace. But yeah, the team works on it. The team is responsible for it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Do we have someone more?
Hello, thank you so much for your amazing presentation. I would like to ask, because you mentioned you have a filmmaking background, how is it different to create a character from a movie to a character for a game?
Interactivity, that's the main difference, and I think that's the main struggle for creators who come from filmmaking, because in filmmaking it's always a linear story. It's not necessarily that it's not a linear story in a video game, but at least from my preferred perspective, the interactivity that you allow the player to control it, the player to do the choices and decisions, makes you think much wider about the character and implications whenever you give some sort of freedom. One thing I think was well mentioned for Fahrenheit, I think, game, that there has to be some sort of limitation to what player can do within the ramification of what the situation gives. That's not necessarily true for all of the games, but for example, for Fahrenheit, there was a kind of a serious scene there. Detectives coming into the bar, talking to someone, investigating, and so on. And the creator said, like, you shouldn't allow the player to, start dancing on the table and throwing dishes and so on. So you kind of squeeze into some sort of portrayal of theoretical freedom within constraining them for not doing stupid things. Otherwise, in many other games, doing stupid things are the most fun tasks. So, your choice.
More?
Question, but I can speak loud. You mentioned that in character creation. Great. In character creation, oh my goodness, you can also give a player a choice to choose how the voice would sound of the main character. So, to your opinion, how many different options should there be at least?
It depends on how complicated the game is, how rich you are, and because if it's a smaller, let's say, usage of voices, I don't know, an example is Chivalry, I think, where you build your knight and you give him a voice. So there are, 100 lines for whatever they say on the battle, charge, I'll murder you, and so on. I think you can have quite a few. I don't know, 5. That's nice. But for a bigger project, I think you have to go with, at least it depends, again, on your budget, on your possibilities. But I think 2 for Mass Effect for male-female versions is great. If they could have... that actually reminds me of Dragon Age Origins. That was one voice I was disappointed in. Because they allow you to choose whether you are a noble, a mage, or a, everyone's hated wood elf. And whenever you choose a wood elf, you start the game and suddenly you sound very much like a noble mage. So I think, it would be nice to have some sort of differentiation if the character actually is differentiated so much. I don't know, ideally, I would say 3 voices for each type would be great, but realistically, 2. It's also okay if you have 1, and if you don't have any, it's also okay. Use all the other tools you can to support that.
You probably got this question before, but how did you get financing for a story-based game?
Ooh, that's not a question for me. I'm not the one in finances. I'm just the one who imagines things and, hey, let's do that, and then cannot afford it.
I mean...
yeah, so I think we wrote a a project to European Union, some kind of creative fund. Šarūnas and Žilvinas over here can answer your question properly. You know, as I said, I'm the one who has beautiful thoughts, not the one who
Right.
counts.
Okay, let me formulate the second question. Did they... Aš lietuviškai paklausiu, gerai? Ar labai nuskriaudė tave stabdydami?
Well, the question was whether I was hurt with all the limitations from, I guess, our financial department. I wouldn't say so. I think the biggest limitation was our general workforce ability to produce things. So even though we could have expanded, it is a question whether we should. So I guess you know, some things hurt, but it's okay.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot.
I'll shoot a question. So it's obviously important to establish a connection for the player with the character, right? So you kind of said that story-wise, that's already established when, I would assume if you're targeting, you know, a foreign audience, the main character being, you know, not local to the scene, kind of sets that. Wouldn't that mean that building a character creator is kind of diminishing return, has like diminishing returns on like invested time of development? Like how much value do you think at the end that brought?
It depends on what exactly does it entail. Is it a small one? Is it a big character creator? I think everyone wants to live their kind of own fantasy kind of story. So it is, for many, I believe, it is quite important to have all those details, to have, and anything you give them, they will, you know, take it and make their own. And the more things you have to make your own, the more enjoyable is the game, especially if it reacts to your choices. As I said, you know, you chose this T-shirt, someone mentions it. You're like, nice, I love it. Then you perhaps have different colors eyes chosen and someone reacts to that. Perhaps, you know, whatever you create on your own as a player, and the world acknowledges it, not only because you know it, but the world knows it, I think all those worth. And by the way, remembering the clothing system that we had, in the middle of the game, we undressed the character again into her pajamas. Because we changed the location of the wardrobe, so we wanted to introduce the wardrobe where the new place is. So she goes to sleep, she wakes up, she's in her pajamas, the player has to dress up again. And one of the interesting things is a lot of people don't dress the same as they did before. And I think that is because you create the hype, you kind of, oh yeah, I like this one. And then you go through the story and it kind of, you know, I'm already tired of this kind of look. And then suddenly you're reminded, hey, change the look. And everybody like, yeah, I'll try something new. And even in the process of puzzling around, I've seen a streamer who went like, I'm stuck. I need to feel better. I'm going to go change, you know?
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
You had to wear specific clothes.
Yeah. It even though not a lot of influence, but yeah, we try to add anything that we added as a feature to be relevant to the story as well. So that's kind of recalling the players' choices as well. Although we definitely not did enough as from what we could, but we tried a little bit of everything here.
Okay, last question maybe, or we can chat, Dimitrius.
Okay, I think I will be that guy whom everybody hates because they ask a very broad question at the very end when everybody wants to go. So, from your own personal perspective, writing a character is a very tough task. What do you do? Maybe you can share some techniques when you have like a writer's block and you are stuck.
Wow. I guess it's not necessarily writing for a character, it's more of a writing in general, because I feel the character often has voices established once you kind of get them, and they kind of develop throughout the story when you write it, but most of the time where you get stuck is like how to make this more interesting, how to make it not stale, how to make it not slow, how to cut all the unnecessary words and say something in an awesome way. So in these cases, I guess one thing is what at least helps me is write the shitty version. Write the bad version, the worst version that you have, as long as it goes from point A to point B where it has to be, because you know where it has to continue. Let it sit there, let it be very bad. Then a week later you return to that place, or you have an idea while you're brushing your teeth and you return to that particular place and you correct it. It might be difficult to find that perfect thing, but every time you kind of return after a while, you have at least one line that you can change to improve it.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Great, great. Thanks a lot, Ignas.